The sound of laughter cut through the elegant ballroom like glass breaking on marble. Vanessa Hamilton froze at the entrance of the Metropolitan Children's Hospital Charity Gala, her modest black dress suddenly feeling like a costume from the wrong play. She had spent 30 minutes choosing this outfit, thinking it was appropriate, classic, safe. Now, watching her husband Richard's arm wrapped around a stunning blonde in a $1,000 red gown, she realized how wrong she had been. Oh my God, is that his wife? Victoria's voice carried across the room, meant to be heard. Look at that dress. Did she shop at a department store? Richard, honey, you didn't tell me she dressed like a secretary from the 1990s. The woman beside Victoria, another blonde with sharp features, giggled behind her champagne glass. I feel sorry for her. Imagine being married to a millionaire and still looking like you're going to a PTA meeting. Richard's face turned red, but instead of defending his wife, he pulled Victoria closer and whispered something in her ear that made her laugh even louder. The diamond necklace around Victoria's neck caught the light, and Vanessa recognized it immediately. She had admired that same necklace at Tiffany's 6 months ago, pointing it out to Richard during their anniversary dinner. He had told her it was too expensive, that they needed to be practical with their money. Vanessa's chest tightened as she watched Victoria run her fingers along the diamonds, the gesture deliberate and cruel. Other guests were starting to notice the scene, their conversations dying down as they looked between Richard's wife standing alone at the entrance and Richard himself, who was openly showing affection to another woman. Vanessa. Mrs. Patterson, the hospital board chairman, approached with a forced smile. How lovely to see you. Richard mentioned you might not be able to make it tonight. Did he? Vanessa thought, realizing Richard had never expected her to come. She had changed her plans last minute, canceling a work conference to support what she thought was an important cause to her husband. Now she understood why he had seemed so surprised when she said she would attend. I wouldn't miss it, Vanessa managed to say, though her voice felt distant to her own ears. It's for such a good cause. Mrs. Patterson's eyes darted toward Richard and Victoria, who were now posing for photos with other donors. Victoria had positioned herself as if she belonged there, as if she were Richard's wife instead of Vanessa. Of course, dear. Well, I should go check on the auction items. Mrs. Patterson hurried away, leaving Vanessa standing alone again. Vanessa forced herself to walk further into the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She had been to dozens of these events over the years, always at Richard's side, always supporting his business relationships and social connections. She knew half the people in this room had made small talk with their wives, had even helped organize fundraisers for some of their favorite charities. But tonight she felt invisible. Worse than invisible, she felt like a joke. Vanessa Hamilton, right? A young woman with a press badge approached, camera ready. I'm doing a piece on tonight's donors. Can I get a photo? Before Vanessa could respond, Victoria's laugh rang out again. Oh honey, you don't want to photograph her. She's not really part of the story tonight. Richard Hamilton is our major donor. You should focus on him and his companion. The reporter looked confused, glancing between Vanessa and Victoria. But aren't you Mrs. Hamilton? Technically yes, Victoria said, appearing beside them like a predator sensing weakness. But really, I'm the one who helps Richard with all his charity work now. Vanessa here is more of a background person. Aren't you, sweetie? The reporter's camera lowered, and Vanessa felt heat creep up her neck. Around them, conversations continued, but she could sense people watching, waiting to see how she would respond to this public humiliation. Vanessa looked at Victoria, really looked at her for the first time. She was probably 28, with perfect teeth and skin that glowed under the ballroom lights. Her dress clung to her body in all the right places, and she wore confidence like an accessory. But there was something else in her eyes, a cruelty that seemed to enjoy causing pain. Background person, Vanessa repeated quietly. Well, yes. Richard told me you've never really been involved in his business or social life. He said you prefer staying home, doing your little marketing job, keeping things simple. Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade. Which is fine, of course. Not everyone can handle this kind of lifestyle. The reporter backed away, sensing the tension, but not before Vanessa noticed her taking a few discreet photos. Tomorrow, these pictures would probably end up online, showing Richard Hamilton's wife being dismissed by his mistress at a public event. Vanessa felt something shift inside her chest, like a door closing and locking. She looked across the room at Richard, who was now deep in conversation with potential business partners, completely ignoring what was happening to his wife. He had allowed this. He had brought his mistress to a public event and let her humiliate his wife in front of people they both knew. You're right, Vanessa said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. I have kept things simple. Maybe too simple. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly, as if she sensed something had changed but couldn't quite identify what. Well, I should let you get back to whatever it is you do with these things, Victoria said, turning to walk away. Victoria, Vanessa called softly. The younger woman turned back, eyebrows raised. That necklace is beautiful. Richard has excellent taste. Victoria's hand moved instinctively to the diamonds, her smile returning. He does, doesn't he? He said he'd never bought jewelry this expensive before. I guess some people are worth the investment. As Victoria walked away, rejoining Richard and slipping her arm through his, Vanessa remained standing in the same spot. But something fundamental had changed. The woman who had walked into this ballroom 30 minutes ago, the woman who would have gone home and cried quietly, who would have confronted Richard in private and accepted his excuses, that woman was gone. In her place stood someone new. Someone who had just realized that 15 years of marriage, of supporting Richard's dreams, of putting his needs first, had earned her nothing but public humiliation and a husband who couldn't even be bothered to defend her honor. Vanessa took out her phone and started typing notes. Victoria's full name, which she had overheard during introductions. The names of the people who had witnessed this scene. The details of Richard's behavior, his body language, the way he had whispered to Victoria like they were alone in the room. She was a marketing professional after all. She understood research, documentation, and strategic planning. She had just never thought to apply those skills to her own life. But that was about to change. As Vanessa finally left the ballroom, she didn't look back at Richard or Victoria. She had seen enough for one night. Tomorrow the real work would begin. Vanessa sat in her car in the hotel parking lot for 20 minutes after leaving the gala, her hands shaking too much to start the engine. The image of Victoria's satisfied smile kept replaying in her mind, along with Richard's complete indifference to his wife's humiliation. She had expected to feel destroyed, but instead she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: clarity. When she finally drove home to their suburban mansion, Richard's car wasn't in the driveway. Of course it wasn't. He was probably at Victoria's apartment, celebrating their successful evening. Vanessa unlocked the front door and walked into the house that had been her prison for so long without her even realizing it. The next morning, Richard came home as Vanessa was making coffee. He looked tired but not guilty, which somehow made everything worse. How was the rest of the gala? She asked casually, not turning around from the coffee maker. Fine. Raised a lot of money for the hospital. His voice was flat, businesslike. You left early. I had a headache. Richard grabbed his travel mug and headed toward the door. I'll be late tonight. Important client dinner. After he left, Vanessa went to his home office. Richard had always been careless with passwords, using variations of his birthday or their anniversary for everything. It took her less than 10 minutes to access his computer. What she found made her stomach turn. Months of emails between Richard and Victoria, starting as business correspondents. She worked as an event coordinator for one of his clients, and quickly becoming personal. The emails revealed a relationship that had been going on for 8 months, not the few weeks Vanessa had initially suspected. But it was the financial records that truly shocked her. Richard had been spending thousands of dollars on Victoria every month. The Tiffany necklace was just the beginning. There were receipts for designer clothes, expensive dinners, weekend trips to luxury resorts, even payments toward Victoria's rent. Vanessa printed everything, her hands steady now despite the rage building inside her chest. As she worked, she began to see patterns. Richard had been careful to hide these expenses from their joint accounts, instead using a business credit card and categorizing everything as client entertainment or business development. Her phone buzzed with a text from her assistant at work. The Morrison campaign wants to schedule a meeting. They heard about your ideas for their product launch. Vanessa stared at the text, remembering. The Morrison Group was one of the biggest marketing challenges in the city. She had been developing a campaign strategy for weeks, working on it during her lunch breaks and evenings. It was innovative, bold, everything her current job at a small marketing firm wouldn't let her pursue. She had been thinking small for so long, accepting less than she deserved in every area of her life. But her skills were sharp, her ideas were good, and she had connections Richard didn't even know about. That afternoon, instead of going home, Vanessa drove to the downtown business district. She walked into the lobby of the Morrison Group's headquarters and asked to speak with Patricia Morrison herself. Mrs. Morrison doesn't take unscheduled meetings, the receptionist said politely. Tell her Vanessa Hamilton is here about the campaign strategy that's going to save her product line. 20 minutes later, Vanessa was sitting across from Patricia Morrison, a woman in her 50s who had built a cosmetics empire from nothing. Patricia listened as Vanessa outlined her vision for repositioning Morrison's struggling luxury line, her ideas for targeting a new demographic, her strategy for competing with the major brands. "This is impressive work," Patricia said finally. "But you work for Brennan Marketing, don't you? Small firm, mostly local clients." "I do. But I'm considering making a change." Patricia leaned forward. "What would it take for you to start your own firm and take on this project?" The question hung in the air between them. Vanessa thought about Richard's credit card statements, about the money he was spending on Victoria while telling his wife they needed to be practical. 3 months to establish the business and develop the full campaign. A contract that gives me creative control. And payment terms that include a significant upfront investment. Done. Patricia extended her hand. "I'll have my lawyers draw up a consulting agreement. But I want exclusivity. You don't work with any of our competitors." Vanessa shook her hand, feeling something shift inside her chest again. "You'll have it." That evening Richard came home late as promised. Vanessa was in bed, pretending to read, when he slipped under the covers beside her. "How was your client dinner?" she asked. "Productive. We might be getting a big contract." He turned away from her, settling into sleep. Vanessa stared at the ceiling, listening to Richard's breathing even out. In the darkness she began planning. She would need an office, a business license, marketing materials. She would need to be strategic about timing, about building her client base before Richard realized what was happening. But most importantly, she would need to be patient. Richard and Victoria thought they had already won, that Vanessa was defeated. Let them think that. Let them get comfortable in their cruelty. The next morning, Vanessa called in sick to work and spent the day researching business formation, consulting with lawyers and looking at office spaces. She used her maiden name, Vanessa Brooks, for all the paperwork. Richard had never legally changed her name on their joint accounts, something that had annoyed her at the time but now seemed like a gift. By the end of the week, Brooks Strategic Consulting existed. Vanessa had a small but elegant office in a downtown building, business cards, and a website. She had also signed her first major client and begun reaching out to contacts from her college marketing program, people who had gone on to bigger companies while she had stayed small and safe. Richard noticed nothing. He was too busy with his important client dinners and his new wardrobe that Victoria was obviously influencing. He had started wearing expensive cologne and had gotten a haircut at a salon instead of his usual barber. But Vanessa noticed everything. She documented his schedule, his expenses, his lies. She researched Victoria's background and discovered some interesting information about her past employment, including why she had left her last job as an event coordinator. 2 weeks after the charity gala, Vanessa was reviewing financial projections in her new office when her phone rang. "Vanessa? This is Catherine Walsh from Walsh Industries." Vanessa knew the name. Walsh Industries was one of Richard's biggest competitors, and Catherine Walsh was the CEO who had been outbidding Richard on contracts for the past year. "I heard through the grapevine that you've started your own consulting firm," Catherine continued. "I also heard about your work with Morrison Group. I'd like to discuss a potential partnership." "What kind of partnership?" "The kind where we both get what we want, and Richard Hamilton learns that underestimating people has consequences." Vanessa smiled, looking out her office window at the city skyline. "I'm listening." Catherine Walsh's office occupied the entire top floor of the Walsh Industries building, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city that made Vanessa feel like she was looking down at a chessboard. Catherine herself was a woman in her early 40s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of confidence that came from building a multi-million-dollar company from scratch. "Richard Hamilton thinks he owns this city's development market," Catherine said, pouring coffee from an expensive machine. "He's been underbidding my projects for 2 years, trying to squeeze me out of deals I've been cultivating for months." Vanessa accepted the coffee, noting the quality of everything in Catherine's office. This was what success looked like when you built it yourself, when you didn't have to ask permission or apologize for taking up space. "I'm not looking to sabotage my husband's business," Vanessa said carefully. "I'm building my own company." Catherine laughed. "Of course you are. But there's no reason we can't help each other succeed. I have 3 major projects coming up that need marketing consultation. Richard has been trying to get meetings with these same clients for months." She slid a folder across the desk. Vanessa opened it and saw contracts worth more money than her old salary had been in 3 years. "Why me?" Vanessa asked. "You could hire any marketing firm in the city. Because you know Richard's strategies better than anyone. You've been to his business dinners, heard his phone calls, seen his presentation materials. You know how he thinks, how he operates. Catherine leaned forward. And because you have something to prove. Vanessa thought about Victoria's laughter, about Richard's indifference, about 15 years of making herself smaller to make him feel bigger. When do we start? Over the next month, Vanessa threw herself into building Brooks Strategic Consulting with an intensity that surprised her. She worked 12-hour days, developing campaigns that were more innovative and aggressive than anything she had produced in her previous job. The Morrison Group campaign was already showing results, with sales increasing by 30% in the first month. At home, she maintained her usual routine. Dinner was ready when Richard came home from his client meetings. She asked polite questions about his day and listened to his vague answers. She did laundry and grocery shopping and paid bills from their joint account, all while her separate business account grew larger each week. Richard noticed nothing, too distracted by his affair to pay attention to his wife's activities. If anything, he seemed relieved that Vanessa was keeping busy with work and not asking too many questions about his schedule. But Vanessa was asking questions, just not to Richard. She was researching his clients, his business model, his weaknesses. She discovered that Hamilton Development relied heavily on a few major relationships, and that Richard's success had made him overconfident and sloppy. He's vulnerable, she told Catherine during one of their weekly strategy meetings. He's been taking on bigger projects than he can handle, stretching his resources thin to impress Victoria. His cash flow is weaker than he wants people to think. Catherine smiled. Good. My architects are finishing the proposal for the Riverside Complex project next week. It's the biggest development contract in the city this year, the one Richard's been calling his retirement project. Vanessa had heard Richard talking about Riverside on phone calls, bragging to Victoria about how the commission would let them travel to Europe together, maybe buy a vacation home. He had been working on his proposal for months, convinced he had the contract locked up. What do you need from me? Vanessa asked. A marketing strategy that shows the city council why Walsh Industries is the better choice. Something that makes Richard's proposal look outdated and small thinking. That evening, Vanessa sat in her home office, the same room where she had discovered Richard's affair, working on the Riverside proposal. She understood the project better than anyone because Richard had practiced his presentations in front of her, asking for her feedback and then dismissing her suggestions as too complicated, or not what they're looking for. Now, she used every piece of information he had shared with her to build a better strategy for his competitor. The irony wasn't lost on her. For years, Richard had benefited from her marketing expertise without giving her credit or compensation. He had used her ideas in his presentations, her research in his proposals, her connections for his networking. She had been his secret weapon and he had never even acknowledged it. Her phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Somehow the woman had gotten her number. Richard's working late again tonight. Hope you're not waiting up. Face blowing a kiss. Vanessa stared at the message, feeling the familiar anger rise in her chest. But instead of letting it consume her, she channeled it into her work. She opened a new document and began outlining a marketing campaign that would not only win Catherine the Riverside contract but position Walsh Industries as the premier development company in the city. 2 hours later, she had created something brilliant. A strategy that addressed every concern the city council had raised about development projects, that showed vision and innovation, that made Richard's approach look exactly like what it was, old-fashioned and self-serving. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't hear Richard come home. He appeared in the doorway of the office, startling her. "What are you working on so late?" he asked, trying to look over her shoulder at the computer screen. Vanessa quickly minimized the document. "Just some campaign materials for work. Nothing interesting." Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. "You've been working a lot lately. Your boss giving you more responsibility?" Something like that. He seemed to accept this explanation, his attention already drifting. "I'm going to take a shower. Long day." After he left, Vanessa reopened her document. She worked until 3 in the morning, refining every detail, anticipating every objection. When she finally finished, she had created something that would change everything. The next day, she presented the strategy to Catherine, who read through it with increasing excitement. "This is perfect," Catherine said. "You've addressed every weakness in our position and created solutions I hadn't even thought of. The city council will love this approach." "There's something else," Vanessa said. She pulled out another folder. "I've been tracking Richard's recent business activities. He's been making some questionable financial decisions, borrowing against future projects to fund his current lifestyle. If Riverside doesn't come through, he's going to be in serious trouble. Catherine raised an eyebrow. How serious? Bankruptcy serious. He's leveraged everything on landing this contract. And you're comfortable with that? Vanessa thought about Victoria's diamonds, about Richard's lies, about the way they had humiliated her in front of people she had to see at every social event in the city. He made his choices, she said. I'm just making mine. A week later, the city council announced that Walsh Industries had been selected for the Riverside Complex project. The local business journal ran a front-page story about the upset, with quotes from council members praising Walsh's innovative marketing approach and forward-thinking vision. That night, Richard came home and threw his briefcase across the living room. How did this happen? He shouted. I had that contract locked up. Catherine Walsh came out of nowhere with this perfect proposal that addressed everything. Vanessa looked up from her dinner, her expression sympathetic. I'm sorry, honey. I know how much that project meant to you. Someone leaked information to her. Someone told her exactly what to say to win over the council. Richard paced the room, his face red with anger. This is going to destroy my cash flow. I was counting on that commission. Maybe it's time to reassess your business strategy, Vanessa said quietly. Focus on what you do best instead of trying to take on projects that might be too big. Richard stopped pacing and stared at her. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just that sometimes smaller, more manageable projects are better than reaching for something beyond your capabilities. The look he gave her was sharp, almost suspicious. For a moment, Vanessa wondered if he was finally starting to question her sudden interest in offering business advice. But then his phone buzzed with a text from Victoria, and his attention shifted immediately. I'm going out, he said, grabbing his keys. Don't wait up. After he left, Vanessa opened her laptop and began working on her next project. Catherine had introduced her to 2 more potential clients, both major companies looking for exactly the kind of strategic marketing that Vanessa specialized in. Brooks Strategic Consulting was no longer just a revenge fantasy. It was becoming a real business, one that could support her independently of Richard's money and success. And this was just the beginning. 3 months after the charity gala, Vanessa's life had split into 2 completely separate worlds. During the day, she was Vanessa Brooks, CEO of a growing consulting firm with an office that overlooked the financial district. At night, she returned home to play the role of Richard Hamilton's neglected wife, cooking dinner and asking about his day while he lied about his whereabouts and spending. The dual existence should have been exhausting, but instead, Vanessa felt more energized than she had in years. Every client meeting, every successful campaign, every check deposited into her business account was proof that she had been capable of so much more than the small life she had accepted. The numbers are incredible, said James Morrison, Patricia Morrison's son and the company's new VP of marketing, during their monthly review meeting. Our luxury line sales have increased 47% since we started working with you. Mother wants to expand the contract to include our entire product range. Vanessa reviewed the sales reports spread across her conference table, feeling a satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with professional accomplishment. The demographic shift is working exactly as we predicted. Your customers were ready for a more sophisticated approach. They just needed the right messaging. There's something else, James continued. We're planning to launch a new men's fragrance line next year. It's going to be a major campaign, probably our biggest marketing spend ever. Mother wants Brooks Strategic to handle the entire launch. The contract James described would triple her company's revenue and establish her as one of the premier marketing consultants in the city. It would also mean hiring additional staff and moving to a larger office, steps that would make her success impossible to hide. I'll need some time to evaluate the scope and put together a proposal, Vanessa said, though her mind was already working through the logistics. This would be a significant expansion for my firm. Take all the time you need. But Vanessa, Mother specifically requested that you handle this personally. She's been telling everyone about your work. You're developing quite a reputation. That evening, Vanessa sat in her car outside her house, thinking about James's words. A reputation. For 15 years, she had been known as Richard Hamilton's wife, the woman who organized his social calendar and smiled politely at his business functions. Now she was building something that belonged entirely to her. Inside the house, Richard was on the phone in his office, his voice carrying down the hallway. I don't care what it costs, he was saying. Victoria wants to go to Paris for her birthday, and I promised her we'd stay at the George V. Just book it and put it on the business account. Vanessa paused in the kitchen doorway listening. Paris? Richard had promised her a trip to Europe for their 10th anniversary, then cancelled it because of a business emergency. That same month, she later discovered, he had taken a weekend trip to Napa Valley alone, or so she had thought at the time. "No, make it the penthouse suite," Richard continued. "And see if you can get reservations at Lambroisi. Victoria's been talking about eating there for months." Vanessa pulled out her phone and made a note. Lambroisi was one of the most expensive restaurants in Paris, the kind of place that required reservations months in advance. Richard was planning an elaborate, expensive vacation with his mistress while his wife wore the same dresses to charity events that she had owned for 5 years. But instead of the familiar ache of betrayal, Vanessa felt something different: calculation. Richard was spending money he didn't have on experiences designed to impress a woman who saw him as a meal ticket. Every dollar he wasted on Victoria was a dollar that wouldn't be available when his business started failing. And his business was already showing cracks. Vanessa had been monitoring his company's public records and client relationships. Losing the Riverside contract had damaged Richard's reputation, and 2 other potential clients had recently chosen different developers. His overhead was high, his debt was increasing, and his judgment was being clouded by his desire to maintain Victoria's expensive lifestyle. The next morning, Vanessa made a decision that surprised even her. She called her old college roommate Helena Grant, who now worked as a financial advisor for high-net-worth individuals. "Vanessa Hamilton," Helena said, her voice warm with genuine pleasure. "It's been ages. How are you?" "Actually, it's Vanessa Brooks now. Professionally, I mean. I started my own consulting firm." "That's fantastic. I always knew you were too smart to stay at that small marketing company forever. Tell me everything." They met for lunch at an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind of place where deals were made over wine and carefully prepared meals. Helena listened as Vanessa described the growth of Brooks Strategic Consulting, her recent successes, and her plans for expansion. "I'm impressed," Helena said. "But I have to ask, how does Richard feel about your sudden business success? Last time we talked, you said he preferred you to keep things low-key." Vanessa chose her words carefully. "Richard and I are growing in different directions right now. I'm focused on building something that's entirely mine." Helena's expression grew serious. "Vanessa, are you planning to divorce Richard?" The question hung between them, unspoken but clearly understood. Vanessa realized this was the first time anyone had asked her directly about her marriage since she had discovered the affair. "I'm planning to be financially independent," Vanessa said. "Whatever happens with Richard, I want to be in control of my own future." "Smart. Very smart." Helena pulled out her tablet. "Let's talk about structuring your business assets and personal finances. If you're building something this successful, you need to protect it properly." They spent 2 hours discussing business incorporation, asset protection, and investment strategies. Helena introduced concepts Vanessa had never considered: offshore accounts, intellectual property protection, and succession planning. "Your business is already worth more than you realize," Helena explained. "The client relationships, the marketing strategies you've developed, your reputation. These are valuable assets that need to be protected." "Protected from what?" "From anyone who might try to claim a stake in your success," Helena said meaningfully. "Including spouses who might argue they contributed to your business development." That afternoon, Vanessa signed papers establishing Brooks Strategic Consulting as a separate legal entity with enhanced protections. She opened new accounts at a different bank, one where Richard had no connections or access. She also retained Helena as her personal financial advisor and began moving her assets into vehicles that Richard couldn't touch. For the first time since discovering the affair, Vanessa felt like she was playing offense instead of defense. That evening, Richard came home with news of his own. "I'm going to be traveling more over the next few months," he announced over dinner. "Big opportunities developing in other markets." "That sounds exciting," Vanessa said neutrally. "Anywhere interesting?" "Chicago, Atlanta, maybe Dallas. I need to expand the business if I'm going to compete with companies like Walsh Industries." Vanessa nodded sympathetically, but her mind was working through the implications. Richard was chasing opportunities in distant cities because his local reputation was damaged. He was also probably planning to take Victoria on these business trips, which meant more expenses and more time away from home. "Will you be traveling alone?" she asked. Richard's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Mostly. I might take Victoria on some trips. She has experience with out-of-state event planning that could be useful." It was the first time Richard had mentioned Victoria by name to his wife since the affair began. The casual way he said it, as if Vanessa should simply accept that his mistress would be joining his business trips, was breathtaking in its audacity. Of course, Vanessa said. Whatever's best for business. Richard looked at her suspiciously, as if waiting for an argument that didn't come. When Vanessa simply continued eating her dinner, he seemed almost disappointed. "You're taking this very well," he said. "Taking what well?" "My travel schedule." Most wives would complain about their husbands being away so much. Vanessa met his eyes across the table. "I've learned to focus on the things I can control, Richard. Your business decisions are yours to make." Something in her tone made him uncomfortable, though he couldn't seem to identify what. The conversation ended, and Richard retreated to his office to make more calls about his upcoming business opportunities. Later that night, Vanessa sat in her own home office, working on the Morrison expansion proposal. But part of her mind was already planning her next moves. Richard was making mistakes, taking risks, and isolating himself from his local power base. Victoria was encouraging his most expensive impulses, and his business was becoming increasingly unstable. All Vanessa had to do was continue building her own success while Richard destroyed his. She didn't need to sabotage him, he was doing that himself. Her phone buzzed with an email from Catherine Walsh. "Heard through the grapevine that Hamilton Development is struggling. Also heard that Brooks Strategic is the hottest marketing firm in the city. Lunch tomorrow to discuss some opportunities?" Vanessa smiled and typed back, "Looking forward to it." Catherine Walsh's lunch invitation led to a private dining room at the city's most exclusive business club, where conversations were protected by tradition and membership fees that kept out anyone without serious money or influence. Vanessa had never been inside the club before, despite Richard being a member for over a decade. He had always said the lunches were just business, and that spouses would be bored by the discussions. Now, sitting across from Catherine and two other women she didn't recognize, Vanessa realized how naive she had been. This wasn't just a business lunch, it was an initiation. "Vanessa, I'd like you to meet Dr. Angela Price and Senator Michelle Torres," Catherine said. Angela runs the largest medical practice in the state, and Michelle just won her second term in the Senate. Dr. Price was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an expensive handbag. Senator Torres looked younger but carried herself with the confidence of someone used to commanding rooms full of powerful people. "Catherine's told us about your work," Dr. Price said. "Very impressive, especially considering you've been flying under the radar for so long." "Sometimes the best strategies develop in quiet," Vanessa replied, unsure where this conversation was heading. Senator Torres leaned forward. "We've been watching Richard Hamilton's business practices for a while. His development projects have raised some questions about environmental compliance and fair bidding processes." Vanessa kept her expression neutral, though her pulse quickened. "I wouldn't know much about Richard's specific business practices." "Of course not," Catherine said smoothly. "But you might find it interesting to know that several of us have had challenges with Richard's approach to business. He has a tendency to make promises he can't keep and to use personal relationships inappropriately." Dr. Price pulled out a tablet and showed Vanessa a series of news articles. "Hamilton Development has been investigated twice for bid manipulation. Both times, the investigations were dropped due to lack of evidence, but the pattern is concerning. There's also the matter of his charity work," Senator Torres added. "Several nonprofits have complained about pledged donations that never materialized. He makes public commitments for the publicity, then finds excuses to reduce or delay the actual payments." Vanessa thought about the Children's Hospital Gala, about Richard's grand gestures in front of the cameras while Victoria wore diamonds that cost more than most people's annual salaries. "Why are you telling me this?" Vanessa asked. "Because," Catherine said, "we believe in supporting women who are building something real. Your consulting firm is legitimate, innovative, and ethical. Richard's business model is the opposite of everything we're trying to promote in this city." Dr. Price nodded. "We've all dealt with men like Richard, successful on the surface, but built on shortcuts and other people's work. The problem is they often take down innocent people when they fall." "Like wives?" Senator Torres said pointedly. Vanessa realized this conversation had been carefully orchestrated. These women knew about her situation, understood her vulnerability, and were offering something that looked like alliance but felt more like recruitment. "What exactly are you proposing?" Vanessa asked. Catherine smiled. "Nothing unethical. But we have connections, resources, and information that could be valuable to someone in your position. We also have clients who need exactly the kind of strategic marketing you provide. Over the next 2 hours, The three women outlined an informal network that had been operating in the city for years. Successful women supporting each other's businesses, sharing information about market opportunities, and quietly working to shift power toward more ethical operators. "We don't sabotage anyone," Dr. Price emphasized. "We simply ensure that qualified women get the same opportunities that have traditionally gone to less qualified men. And if those men happen to lose market share because they can't compete with superior service," Senator Torres added, "that's just good business." By the end of lunch, Vanessa had 3 new potential clients and an invitation to join a monthly networking group that included some of the most influential women in the state. She also had something more valuable: information about Richard's business vulnerabilities that she hadn't known existed. That afternoon she returned to her office energized but cautious. The network Catherine had introduced her to was powerful, but it also came with expectations and loyalties that Vanessa wasn't sure she was ready to navigate. Her assistant knocked on her door. "Miss Brooks? There's a woman here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's about Richard Hamilton." Vanessa's stomach tightened. "Send her in." The woman who entered was elegantly dressed but nervous, probably in her early 40s with the kind of carefully maintained appearance that spoke of both money and insecurity. "Miss Brooks? I'm Jennifer Chin. I know this is strange, but I heard you might understand my situation." Vanessa gestured to the chair across from her desk. "What situation is that?" Jennifer's hands twisted in her lap. "My husband is having an affair. With Victoria Reeves. The same woman who, well, I know about your husband too." The revelation hit Vanessa like cold water. Victoria wasn't just Richard's mistress, she was playing multiple men at the same time. "How long have you known?" Vanessa asked. 3 months. I hired a private investigator after I found some suspicious charges on our credit cards. Victoria's been seeing my husband every Tuesday and Thursday. Your husband gets Mondays, Wednesdays, and weekends. Jennifer pulled out a folder and placed it on Vanessa's desk. "I have photos, financial records, even recordings. Victoria's been very careful to keep them both from finding out about each other." Vanessa opened the folder and saw images that made her feel sick and vindicated at the same time. Victoria kissing Jennifer's husband outside expensive restaurants. Victoria wearing different jewelry in photos taken days apart. Richard's diamonds on Monday, another man's emeralds on Thursday. "Why are you showing me this?" Vanessa asked. "Because I want her gone and I think you do too. But more than that, I want both our husbands to face consequences for their choices." Jennifer's voice grew stronger. "I've been a good wife for 18 years. I supported Michael's career, raised our children, managed his social obligations. And he's been spending our retirement fund on a woman who's also spending your husband's money." Vanessa studied Jennifer's face, seeing her own anger reflected there. But she also saw something else: desperation. Jennifer wanted revenge, but she didn't have a plan beyond exposing the affair. "What do you want from me?" Vanessa asked. "Partnership. You've built a successful business, you have connections I don't have. I have information and resources you might need. Together, we could make sure Victoria faces consequences for manipulating both our families." "And our husbands?" Jennifer's smile was sharp. "They made their choices. Let them live with the results." Vanessa closed the folder, her mind racing. Victoria's deception added a new dimension to the situation, but it also created opportunities. 2 betrayed wives with different skills and resources, working together, could accomplish more than either could alone. "I need time to think about this," Vanessa said. "Of course. But Vanessa, Victoria's planning something big." The private investigator heard her on the phone talking about exit strategies and maximizing the investment. "I think she's planning to disappear with as much money as she can get from both our husbands." After Jennifer left, Vanessa sat in her office staring out at the city skyline. The game had become more complicated, but also more winnable. Victoria's greed and Richard's arrogance were about to collide in ways they couldn't anticipate. Her phone buzzed with a text from Richard: "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up." Vanessa smiled and typed back, "Of course, honey. I'll probably be working late too." But instead of going home to an empty house, Vanessa had plans. Catherine's network meeting was tonight, and she was finally ready to stop playing defense. The monthly network meeting took place in Dr. Price's medical building after hours, in a conference room that overlooked the city's financial district. When Vanessa arrived, she found 12 women seated around a polished table: business owners, lawyers, doctors, and politicians who represented more collective wealth and influence than most corporate boards. "Welcome to our newest member," Catherine announced as Vanessa took her seat. Vanessa Brooks of Brooks Strategic Consulting. The introductions revealed a group more powerful than Vanessa had imagined. There was a federal judge, the CEO of the city's largest bank, 2 state legislators, and several women who owned businesses worth tens of millions of dollars. "We have a tradition here," said Maria Rodriguez, who owned a chain of luxury hotels. "New members share a challenge they're facing, and the group offers perspective and resources." Vanessa had prepared for this moment, but sitting among these accomplished women, she felt the weight of finally speaking her truth out loud. "My husband has been having an affair for 8 months, she began. "He's been using business funds to support his mistress's lifestyle while lying to me about our financial situation. I recently discovered that his mistress is also involved with at least one other married man, running the same scheme." The room was silent, but Vanessa sensed attention rather than judgment. "I've started building my own business and establishing financial independence," she continued. "But I'm struggling with how much I should act on what I know versus just focusing on my own success." Senator Torres spoke first. "What does your instinct tell you?" "That my husband has made choices that will destroy him without any help from me. But his mistress is actively manipulating multiple families, and she's planning some kind of exit strategy that will probably leave everyone damaged." Dr. Price leaned forward. "Do you have evidence of financial fraud?" "Extensive evidence. My husband has been categorizing personal expenses as business costs, which is tax fraud. His mistress has been accepting money from multiple men under false pretenses, which could be prosecuted as fraud as well." Judge Patricia Williams, a woman with silver hair and penetrating eyes, asked the question Vanessa had been dreading. "What outcome do you want?" "I want my husband to face real consequences for his choices. I want his mistress to be stopped before she destroys other families. And I want to build something so successful that I never have to depend on anyone else's money or approval again." Maria Rodriguez smiled. "Those are achievable goals. Let's talk about how to reach them." Over the next 2 hours, the group helped Vanessa refine her strategy. They discussed legal approaches to exposing financial fraud, business tactics for competing with Richard's company, and personal strategies for protecting herself during what would inevitably become a public situation. "The key is patience and documentation," Judge Williams advised. "If you move too quickly, you look vindictive. If you let them hang themselves while building your own success, you look like the victim who overcame adversity." Catherine had specific suggestions about business strategy. "Walsh Industries is bidding on the oceanfront casino project next month. It's worth $20 million and Richard's been positioning himself as the front runner. If Brooks Strategic were to develop the marketing strategy for our bid, we might be able to change the narrative." "What's the timeline?" Vanessa asked. 3 weeks. The proposal is due the day after your husband returns from his Paris vacation with Victoria." The timing was perfect. Richard would be distracted by his romantic getaway, spending money he couldn't afford, while Vanessa was building the campaign that would cost him his biggest contract of the year. Dr. Price offered resources of her own. "My practice manages health insurance for several major companies in the city. If Hamilton Development were to face questions about their employee benefits management, it might raise concerns about their operational efficiency." Senator Torres had the most intriguing suggestion. "The state is launching a new ethics initiative for companies that bid on public projects. Enhanced background checks, financial auditing, tax compliance reviews. It's voluntary now, but companies that participate get preferred status on government contracts." "And companies that don't participate?" Vanessa asked. "Face much more scrutiny when irregularities are discovered." By the end of the meeting, Vanessa had a 3-pronged strategy. She would compete directly with Richard for the casino project while simultaneously gathering evidence of his financial improprieties and positioning herself as the ethical alternative to his increasingly questionable business practices. The next morning, Vanessa met with Jennifer Chen at a coffee shop downtown. Jennifer looked exhausted but determined, clutching a briefcase that Vanessa assumed contained more evidence of Victoria's deceptions. "I've been thinking about your offer," Vanessa said. "I'm interested in working together, but I need to know you're prepared for how ugly this could get." Jennifer's jaw tightened. "Victoria's been stealing from my family for months. My husband gave her $15,000 last week, supposedly to help her start her own event planning business. She used the money to buy a new car." "How do you know?" "Because she bragged about it to her friend on the phone. My investigator has been recording her calls." Jennifer opened her briefcase and pulled out a digital recorder. "Listen to this." Victoria's voice came through clearly. "Richard thinks I'm using his money for the Paris trip, and Michael thinks I'm using his money to pay off credit cards. Neither of them knows about the other, and neither of them knows I'm saving everything for my escape fund. By Christmas, I'll have enough to disappear and start over somewhere warm. Vanessa felt her blood run cold. She's planning to run. With over $100,000 stolen from our families, Jennifer confirmed. But here's the interesting part. She's also been gathering information about both our husbands' business practices. I think she's planning to use what she knows as insurance if either of them tries to come after her. What kind of information? Jennifer pulled out a thick folder. Tax documents, client communications, financial records that our husbands probably don't realize she's copied. Victoria's been very thorough about collecting evidence of their questionable practices. Vanessa reviewed the documents, recognizing Richard's handwriting on several notes about creative accounting and flexible interpretations of contract terms. Victoria had enough evidence to destroy both men if she chose to use it. This changes everything, Vanessa said. Victoria's not just a mistress, she's been planning this from the beginning. Which means we need to move faster than she does, Jennifer said. I want to expose everything before she disappears with our money. No, Vanessa said thoughtfully. We let her try to run. But we make sure she doesn't get away with it. Jennifer looked confused, but Vanessa was already forming a plan. Victoria's escape attempt would be the perfect trigger for exposing everything. The affairs, the financial fraud, the tax evasion. And if Vanessa timed it correctly, Richard and Victoria would destroy each other while she emerged as the innocent victim who had built something successful despite their betrayal. Trust me, Vanessa said. Victoria's greed is going to be her downfall. We just need to make sure we're ready when it happens. That afternoon, Vanessa threw herself into the casino project proposal with an intensity that surprised even her. She worked 18-hour days, developing a marketing strategy that was more comprehensive and innovative than anything Walsh Industries had ever presented. Meanwhile, Richard was preparing for his Paris vacation, oblivious to the fact that his wife was about to compete directly against him for the biggest contract of his career. He had even asked Vanessa to manage some of his business calls while he was away, never suspecting that she was gathering intelligence about his weaknesses. 3 days before Richard's departure, Vanessa submitted the Walsh Industries proposal to the Casino Development Board. The marketing strategy was brilliant, addressing every concern the board had raised about previous development projects and offering solutions that positioned Walsh as the clear choice for the contract. That evening, Richard came home excited about his upcoming trip. Victoria's never been to Paris, he said over dinner. I want to show her everything, the Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, the best restaurants in the city. That sounds wonderful, Vanessa said sincerely. You both deserve a relaxing vacation. Richard looked at her suspiciously, still expecting an argument that never came. When Vanessa simply smiled and wished him a good trip, he seemed almost disappointed by her lack of reaction. But Vanessa had moved beyond caring about Richard's vacations with Victoria. She was focused on the bigger picture, the long-term strategy that would give her everything she wanted while letting Richard's own choices destroy him. The first strike was about to land and Richard would never see it coming. While Richard and Victoria were enjoying their Parisian vacation, Vanessa was undergoing her own transformation. Not just professionally but personally, becoming the woman she should have been all along, before 15 years of marriage had convinced her to make herself smaller and quieter and more convenient. The call came on a Tuesday morning while she was reviewing quarterly projections in her office. Brooks Strategic Consulting had grown beyond her wildest expectations, with revenue that now exceeded what Richard's company had earned in its best year. Ms. Brooks, her assistant announced over the intercom, Catherine Walsh is on line 1. She says it's excellent news. Vanessa picked up the phone, her heart already racing with anticipation. We got it, Catherine said without preamble. The casino project. The board voted unanimously to accept Walsh Industries' proposal. They said our marketing strategy was the most comprehensive they'd ever seen. Vanessa closed her eyes, feeling a wave of satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with pure professional accomplishment. She had created something brilliant, something that won on its own merits. There's more, Catherine continued. The board was so impressed that they're recommending us for 2 other major projects. Your marketing work is going to reshape development in this entire region. After hanging up, Vanessa sat in her office chair and laughed out loud. Not the bitter laugh of someone getting revenge, but the pure joy of someone who had discovered their own power and used it well. Her phone buzzed with a text from Richard, having amazing time in Paris. Victoria loves everything. You should see her in the hotel suite. She looks like she belongs in this kind of luxury. Instead of feeling hurt, Vanessa felt something close to pity. Richard was so busy trying to impress Victoria that he had no idea his business was crumbling back home. The casino contract had been his retirement project, the deal that was supposed to secure his legacy and financial future. Now it belonged to his wife's new business partner. That afternoon, Vanessa did something she hadn't done in years. She went shopping for herself. Not for a charity event or business function, but because she wanted to update her image to match her new reality. The stylist at the luxury department store was a woman named Carmen who specialized in working with successful professional women. "I need a complete wardrobe update," Vanessa told her. "Something that reflects confidence and success, but still feels authentic to who I am." Carmen walked around Vanessa, assessing her build and coloring with professional expertise. "You have beautiful bone structure and natural elegance. We just need to update your styling to match your energy. What kind of image are you trying to project? Powerful? Independent? Someone who built something significant on her own terms?" Over the next 3 hours, Carmen helped Vanessa select a wardrobe that was both sophisticated and striking. Rich jewel tones that complemented her skin, well-tailored pieces that showed confidence without being flashy, accessories that suggested success without ostentation. "The key," Carmen explained while Vanessa tried on a deep emerald dress that transformed her entire appearance, "is wearing clothes that reflect your internal power rather than trying to project something you don't feel." Looking at herself in the mirror, Vanessa realized that she finally felt as successful as she was becoming. The woman reflected back at her wasn't trying to disappear or avoid attention. She was claiming space and owning her accomplishments. While Vanessa was discovering her new style, Jennifer Chen was conducting surveillance on Victoria's activities. They had agreed to stay in contact while their husbands were traveling, sharing information and coordinating their timing. "Victoria's been busy while Richard's away," Jennifer reported during their evening phone call. "She met with a real estate agent yesterday, looking at apartments in Miami. Expensive ones, paid for in cash. She's definitely planning to run," Vanessa confirmed. "Any word on when?" "My investigator thinks she's waiting for both our husbands to transfer some final payments. Michael promised her $20,000 for her business expansion when he gets back from his conference. Richard probably made similar promises." Vanessa thought about Richard's recent behavior, his casual mentions of helping Victoria get established in her event planning career. He had probably promised her startup money, maybe even discussed bringing her into his business as a legitimate partner. "We need to be ready to move as soon as they get back," Vanessa said. "If Victoria gets that money and disappears, our evidence might not be enough to pursue prosecution." "Already handled," Jennifer said with satisfaction. "I've been working with a lawyer who specializes in financial fraud. We have enough evidence to freeze Victoria's accounts if she tries to transfer large amounts of money." The next morning brought unexpected news. Vanessa's assistant knocked on her office door with an expression of barely contained excitement. "Ms. Brooks, there's a reporter from Business Weekly on the phone. They want to do a feature story about your company's rapid growth and the casino project's success." Vanessa's first instinct was to decline the interview. She wasn't ready for that level of public attention. But then she reconsidered. Richard was coming home tomorrow, and he would need to learn about his wife's success eventually. Better for him to discover it through the media than through private confrontation. "Schedule the interview for Thursday afternoon," she told her assistant, "and ask them to send a photographer. I want this story to be comprehensive." Wednesday evening, Richard returned from Paris, tanned and relaxed and full of stories about romantic dinners and luxury hotels. He showed Vanessa photos on his phone, pictures of Victoria at the Louvre, Victoria shopping on the Champs-Élysées, Victoria wearing a new diamond bracelet that Vanessa recognized from a boutique they had visited together years earlier. "She has such sophisticated taste," Richard said, scrolling through images of his mistress posing in front of French landmarks. "I think traveling really suits her." She was talking about maybe spending more time in Europe, possibly even buying a place there. Vanessa made appropriate responses while internally calculating the cost of Richard's Parisian fantasy. The hotel alone had probably cost $15,000 for the week, not including meals, shopping, and the new jewelry. Richard had spent more on this single vacation than most people earned in 6 months. "How did things go here while I was away?" Richard asked, finally showing some interest in his wife's activities. "Fine. I stayed busy with work projects." "Good. I'm glad you're keeping yourself occupied." Richard's attention was already drifting, probably thinking about Victoria and their shared memories of European luxury. Thursday afternoon, The Business Weekly interview took place in Vanessa's office, with photos shot against the backdrop of the city skyline. The reporter, Sandra Kim, was a sharp woman in her 30s who had clearly done her research. Brooks Strategic Consulting has grown from startup to major player in less than 6 months, Sandra began. That's almost unprecedented in the consulting industry. What's your secret? I think I was ready to build something significant for a long time, Vanessa said carefully. I just needed the right motivation to stop playing it safe. The casino project represents a major victory against some established competitors, including Hamilton Development. Richard Hamilton has dominated luxury development in this city for over a decade. How does it feel to beat him at his own game? The question hung in the air, loaded with implications that Sandra clearly understood but wasn't stating directly. Competition is healthy for everyone, Vanessa replied. I think the best ideas should win regardless of who presents them. But Sandra's next question showed that she had done more research than Vanessa expected. Our records show that you and Richard Hamilton have the same home address. Would you care to comment on that? Vanessa looked directly into the camera, knowing that this moment would define how her story was told. Richard Hamilton is my husband, she said simply. Brooks Strategic Consulting is my company, built with my ideas and my work. Those are two separate facts that speak for themselves. The interview continued for another hour, with Sandra asking detailed questions about Vanessa's business philosophy, her growth strategies, and her plans for expansion. By the time it ended, Vanessa knew that the story would be more than just a business profile. It would be the public revelation of everything she had built while Richard was distracted by his affair. That evening, Richard came home to find Vanessa cooking dinner as usual. But something was different about her. The new clothes, the confident posture, the way she moved through their kitchen like someone who owned her own space. You look different, he said, studying her face. Did you change your hair? I updated my professional wardrobe, Vanessa said, setting plates on the table. My business has been growing and I wanted my appearance to reflect that. What kind of growth? Richard asked, and for the first time in months, he seemed genuinely interested in his wife's answer. The kind that changes everything, Vanessa said, meeting his eyes across their dining room table. The Business Weekly article comes out tomorrow. You'll be able to read all about it. The Business Weekly article hit the newsstands on Friday morning with a headline that made Vanessa's phone start ringing before she even got to her office. Local woman builds $1 million consulting empire while husband's business crumbles. Sandra Kim had written exactly the story Vanessa had hoped for. A profile that focused on her professional accomplishments while dropping just enough hints about her personal situation to make readers curious. The article praised Brooks Strategic Consulting's innovative approach, highlighted the casino project victory, and mentioned almost casually that Vanessa's main competitor was her own husband. By noon, Vanessa had received calls from 3 potential new clients, 2 reporters wanting follow-up interviews, and 1 very angry husband. What the hell is this? Richard shouted, bursting into her office without knocking. He threw the magazine onto her desk, his face red with rage. You told a reporter that I'm your competitor? You made me look like a fool. Vanessa looked up calmly from her computer. I told a reporter that Richard Hamilton is my husband and Brooks Strategic Consulting is my company. Both statements are factual. You didn't tell me you were competing for the casino project. You let me think you were just doing small marketing campaigns while you were sabotaging my biggest contract. I wasn't sabotaging anything. I was doing my job better than you were doing yours. Richard stared at her, seeming to really see his wife for the first time in months. The woman behind the desk wasn't the quiet, accommodating person he had married. This woman wore a tailored business suit that probably cost more than her old monthly salary, sat in an office that overlooked the financial district, and spoke to him like an equal rather than a dependent. How long has this been going on? He demanded. Which part? My business success? Or my knowledge of your affair with Victoria? The question hit Richard like a physical blow. He sank into the chair across from her desk, his anger replaced by something that looked like panic. Vanessa, I can explain? You don't need to explain anything to me, Richard. Your choices speak for themselves. Vanessa's voice was steady, professional. Just like my choices speak for themselves. Your choices? What's that supposed to mean? Vanessa opened her desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder. It means I've spent the last few months building a business that's now worth more than yours. It means I've documented every lie you've told me and every dollar you've spent on Victoria. And it means I'm done pretending that your betrayal hasn't fundamentally changed our relationship. Richard opened the folder and found printouts of his emails with Victoria, credit card statements showing his expenses on her behalf, and financial projections showing how his affair had damaged his business judgment and cash flow. "You've been spying on me," he said weakly. "I've been protecting myself from the consequences of your decisions. There's a difference." Before Richard could respond, Vanessa's assistant knocked on the door. "Miss Brooks? Jennifer Chin is here for your 2 o'clock appointment." "Send her in," Vanessa said, never taking her eyes off Richard. Jennifer entered the office looking nervous but determined, carrying her own briefcase full of evidence. When she saw Richard sitting there, her expression hardened. "Mr. Hamilton," she said coldly, "I don't think we've been properly introduced. I'm Jennifer Chin. My husband Michael has been sharing Victoria's affections with you for the past 8 months. Richard's face went white. "What are you talking about?" Jennifer opened her briefcase and pulled out photographs. Images of Victoria with her husband, copies of financial records showing Michael's payments to Victoria, transcripts of phone conversations in which Victoria discussed manipulating both men. "Victoria's been playing you against each other," Jennifer said. "Taking money from both families while planning her escape to Miami. She's been laughing about how easy it was to manipulate 2 successful businessmen who were so busy thinking with their egos that they never asked the right questions." Richard stared at the photographs, his hands shaking slightly. "This can't be right. Victoria told me she wasn't seeing anyone else. She said she was waiting for me to leave Vanessa so we could be together." "She told my husband the same thing about me," Jennifer replied. "Except her real plan was to take as much money as possible from both of you and disappear before either of you figured out what was happening." Vanessa watched her husband process this information, seeing his anger and betrayal and wounded pride play across his face. Part of her felt sorry for him. He had been manipulated and lied to, just as she had been. But a larger part of her felt satisfied that he was finally experiencing the consequences of his choices. "There's more," Jennifer continued, pulling out additional documents. "Victoria's been gathering information about both your business practices. She has copies of financial records, tax documents, client communications. Everything she would need to cause serious problems if either of you tried to pursue her legally." "She was blackmailing us?" Richard asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Insurance," Vanessa corrected. "She was making sure she could destroy both of you if you became inconvenient." Richard looked between his wife and Jennifer, finally understanding the scope of Victoria's deception and his own foolishness. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," Vanessa said simply. "I don't want your money, your apologies, or your promises to change. I want you to understand that the woman you've been supporting and the marriage you've been neglecting are both ending, and you brought this on yourself. And I want Victoria to face consequences for what she's done to our families," Jennifer added. "We have enough evidence to pursue fraud charges, but we need your cooperation." Richard sat in silence for several minutes, processing everything he had learned. Finally, he looked up at his wife with something that might have been respect. "How long have you been planning this?" "I haven't been planning anything," Vanessa said honestly. "I've been reacting to your choices and building something better for myself. Everything that's happening to you is the natural result of the decisions you made." "What happens now?" Vanessa leaned back in her chair, looking at the man she had been married to for 15 years. He seemed smaller now, diminished by his own poor judgment and the realization that he had been played by everyone around him. "Now you decide what kind of person you want to be going forward," she said. "And I continue building the life I should have had all along." After Richard and Jennifer left, Vanessa sat alone in her office, feeling strangely empty. The confrontation she had been anticipating for months was over, and it had been quieter and sadder than she had expected. There was no dramatic shouting, no satisfying moment of complete victory. Just 2 people acknowledging that their relationship was over and trying to figure out how to move forward. Her phone buzzed with a text from Catherine Walsh. "Saw the article. Congratulations on everything. The casino project groundbreaking is next month. Black tie event with major media coverage. Perfect opportunity to debut the new you publicly." Vanessa smiled, typing back, "Looking forward to it." The groundbreaking ceremony would be the perfect place to complete her transformation from Richard Hamilton's quiet wife to Vanessa Brooks, successful businesswoman. And if Richard happened to be watching from the sidelines while his former wife claimed credit for the project that should have been his, well, that was just business. The oceanfront casino groundbreaking ceremony was scheduled for a crisp October evening, with the setting sun providing a dramatic backdrop for what promised to be the social and business event of the year. Vanessa had spent weeks planning every detail of her appearance, working with Carmen to create a look that would be remembered and photographed. The dress was a deep sapphire blue that complemented her skin tone perfectly, cut in clean lines that suggested power rather than trying to seduce. The jewelry was minimal but expensive, diamond earrings and a simple platinum bracelet that caught the light when she moved. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo that showed off her neckline, and her makeup was flawless but understated. But the most important accessory was her confidence. Standing in front of her bedroom mirror, Vanessa saw a woman who had built something significant and was ready to claim credit for it publicly. Richard hadn't come home the night before. Since their confrontation in her office 2 weeks earlier, he had been staying at a hotel downtown, trying to sort out the wreckage of his business and personal life. Victoria had disappeared immediately after Jennifer and Vanessa exposed her scheme, leaving town with whatever money she had managed to steal but without the larger payouts she had been planning. The legal proceedings against Victoria were moving forward, with both families cooperating to recover what they could. But more importantly, Richard's business was failing. The revelation that he had been manipulated by his mistress, combined with the loss of several major contracts, had damaged his reputation beyond repair. Hamilton Development was facing bankruptcy within 6 months. Vanessa arrived at the groundbreaking ceremony in a car service, making her entrance as cameras flashed and reporters took notes. The guest list included everyone who mattered in the city's business and political circles, and Vanessa could feel their attention as she walked across the red carpet that had been laid out for the occasion. Vanessa. Catherine Walsh approached with a genuine smile, wearing an elegant black dress that complemented Vanessa's blue. "You look absolutely stunning. Ready for your moment in the spotlight?" "More ready than I've ever been," Vanessa replied honestly. The ceremony began with speeches from city officials and business leaders, all praising the vision and innovation that had made the casino project possible. Vanessa stood on the platform, with the other key participants, looking out at a crowd that included many people who had known her only as Richard Hamilton's wife. When Catherine introduced her as the brilliant strategist behind our marketing success, the applause was enthusiastic and sustained. Vanessa stepped forward to the microphone, looking out at faces that reflected surprise, admiration, and in some cases new respect. "6 months ago, I was known primarily as someone's wife," she began, her voice clear and confident. "Today, I'm here as the CEO of Brooks Strategic Consulting, celebrating a project that represents everything I believe about innovation, integrity, and the power of believing in your own vision." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. Vanessa could see reporters taking notes, cameras focusing on her face, and business leaders who had never given her a second thought now paying complete attention. "This casino represents more than just economic development," she continued. "It represents what happens when you stop accepting limitations and start building something meaningful. When you stop waiting for permission and start creating opportunities." As she spoke, Vanessa caught sight of a familiar figure at the back of the crowd. Richard stood near the media area, wearing a suit that looked expensive but somehow diminished on his frame. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read: surprise, regret, maybe even pride. But what struck her most was how small he looked. Not physically but in terms of presence and significance. The man who had dominated her life for 15 years now seemed like just another face in the crowd, irrelevant to her story and her success. "The most important lesson I've learned," Vanessa concluded, "is that success isn't about who you know or who supports you. It's about the value you create and the integrity you bring to every relationship, every project, every decision." The applause was thunderous. As Vanessa stepped back from the microphone, she felt something she had never experienced before: the complete ownership of her own accomplishments. No one could diminish this moment or claim credit for her success. This was entirely hers. After the ceremony, the reception moved to a luxury hotel ballroom where the city's elite gathered to celebrate and network. Vanessa found herself at the center of conversations, with business leaders and politicians approaching her to discuss potential partnerships and opportunities. "Ms. Brooks," said Jonathan Mitchell, the CEO of the state's largest bank, "I've been following your company's growth with great interest. We're looking for a marketing consultant to help launch our new investment division. Would you be available for a meeting next week?" "I'd be delighted," Vanessa replied, accepting his business card. "Have my assistant call your office to schedule something." The conversations continued throughout the evening: opportunities worth millions of dollars, partnerships that would establish her as one of the premier consultants in the region, invitations to join boards and advisory committees that would expand her influence even further. Around 10 o'clock, as the reception was winding down, Vanessa found herself alone on the hotel's terrace, looking out at the city lights and processing everything that had happened. She felt proud, accomplished, and strangely peaceful. Vanessa. She turned to find Richard approaching, his hands in his pockets and his expression uncertain. Richard. I wondered if you would come tonight. I had to see it for myself, he said, standing a few feet away from her. What you've built, what you've accomplished. It's impressive. Thank you. They stood in silence for a moment, two people who had shared 15 years of marriage but now felt like strangers to each other. I owe you an apology, Richard said finally. Not just for the affair but for never seeing what you were capable of. For making you feel like you had to be smaller to make me feel bigger. Vanessa looked at him, seeing genuine remorse in his expression. I appreciate that, Richard. But I don't need your apology to validate my success. I built this without you and I'm proud of that. I know. That's what makes it so impressive. Richard paused, seeming to struggle with his words. Victoria played me for a fool. She manipulated me, stole from me, and made me betray the best thing in my life. I lost everything because I was too arrogant to see what was happening. And what did you learn from that? That I was never as smart as I thought I was. That I took for granted the one person who actually cared about me. And that some mistakes can't be undone, only learned from. Vanessa felt a flicker of the old affection she had once felt for this man, but it was distant now, like remembering a song from childhood. Too much had changed for there to be any possibility of going back. What will you do now? She asked. Start over, I suppose. Hamilton development is finished, but maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe I can build something better this time, something based on integrity instead of ego. I hope you do. Richard nodded, then looked directly at her with something that might have been admiration. You're going to be incredibly successful, Vanessa. You already are. I'm sorry I wasn't smart enough to see it sooner. After he left, Vanessa remained on the terrace for another few minutes, feeling the closure of a chapter in her life. The woman who had been married to Richard Hamilton was gone, replaced by someone stronger and more complete. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Chin. Saw the news coverage of tonight. You looked amazing and powerful. Victoria's trial starts next month. She'll face consequences for what she did to all of us. Vanessa smiled and typed back, justice served. And we're both free to build whatever comes next. As she walked back through the hotel lobby, Vanessa caught her reflection in the mirrors lining the walls. The woman looking back at her was polished, confident, and entirely self-possessed. She looked like someone who had built an empire and was ready to expand it even further. Tomorrow there would be new challenges, new opportunities, and new ways to grow Brooks Strategic Consulting into something even more significant. But tonight, Vanessa allowed herself to savor the moment when she had finally claimed her own story and made it public. The groundbreaking ceremony had been more than just a business event. It had been the moment when Vanessa Brooks announced to the world that she was here, she was successful, and she was just getting started. 1 year later, Vanessa stood in the executive office of her new headquarters building, looking out at a city that had become her domain in ways she never could have imagined. Brooks Strategic Consulting now employed 40 people and had clients in 6 states. The casino project had opened to record-breaking crowds and universal acclaim, cementing Vanessa's reputation as one of the most innovative marketing strategists in the country. The divorce from Richard had been finalized 6 months earlier, with Vanessa keeping the house and her business while Richard relocated to another state to start over. He had sent her a letter recently, updating her on his new consulting firm and thanking her again for handling their separation with dignity. She had been genuinely happy to hear that he was rebuilding his life on a foundation of honesty this time. Victoria had been convicted of fraud and sentenced to 2 years in prison, though she would be eligible for parole in 18 months. The money she had stolen had been recovered and returned to the family she had damaged. Jennifer Chin had used her share to start her own interior design business and had become one of Vanessa's closest friends. But the most significant change in Vanessa's life wasn't professional, it was personal. Ms. Brooks? Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. Dr. Williams is here for your lunch appointment. Vanessa smiled, checking her appearance in the mirror one last time. Send him in. Dr. Anthony Williams entered her office with the easy confidence of someone who was comfortable in his own skin. He was a cardiologist at the city's teaching hospital, a man in his early 40s with kind eyes and a smile that had been making Vanessa's heart race for the past 3 months. They had met at a charity fundraiser that Vanessa had organized for the Children's Hospital. The same hospital where her humiliation at Richard's hands had begun her transformation a year earlier. Anthony had approached her not because he recognized her from the media coverage of her success, but because he had been impressed by her presentation about using business skills to maximize charitable impact. Ready for our adventure? he asked, offering her his arm. Absolutely. Their lunch date was actually a helicopter tour of the city, something Anthony had arranged to celebrate Vanessa's latest business milestone, landing a contract with a major international corporation that would expand Brooks' strategic consulting into global markets. As they flew over the city, Vanessa pointed out landmarks that had significance in her journey. The hotel where the casino groundbreaking had taken place. The building where her first office had been located. The mansion she had shared with Richard, which she had sold to buy her current penthouse downtown. Do you ever regret how everything unfolded? Anthony asked, his voice coming through the helicopter's communication system. Vanessa considered the question, looking down at the sprawling metropolis where she had rebuilt her entire life. I regret the pain it caused, and I regret the time I wasted being smaller than I needed to be. But I don't regret the outcome. I'm happier now than I've ever been. Even with all the challenges of building a business from scratch? Especially because of those challenges. Every obstacle I overcame, every client I won, every employee I hired. Those accomplishments belong entirely to me. No one can diminish them or take credit for them. Anthony reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing across her knuckles. I admire that about you. Your independence, your strength, the way you turned betrayal into motivation instead of bitterness. Their relationship had developed slowly, carefully, with both of them conscious of the need to build something genuine rather than rushing into passion. Anthony had been divorced for 3 years, with 2 teenage children who lived with their mother in another city. He understood the complexities of starting over and the importance of creating a partnership between equals. There's something I want to discuss with you, Anthony said as the helicopter began its descent back to the airport. My ex-wife is getting remarried next month, and my kids want to move here to live with me full-time. Vanessa felt her stomach tighten slightly. Anthony's children were good kids. She had met them twice during their visits to the city, but the idea of suddenly becoming a major part of their lives was intimidating. How do you feel about that? She asked. Excited and terrified, Anthony admitted. I want to be a better father than I was when I was married and working 100-hour weeks. But I also want to make sure that whatever develops between us isn't complicated by my responsibilities as a parent. What are you saying? Anthony was quiet for a moment, looking out at the city below them. I'm saying that I'm falling in love with you, Vanessa. But I need to know if you're ready for a relationship that includes teenagers and school events and all the chaos that comes with blended families. The question hung between them as the helicopter touched down. Vanessa thought about her carefully controlled life, her pristine penthouse, her structured schedule that allowed for maximum professional productivity. But she also thought about the loneliness she sometimes felt despite all her success, the way Anthony's presence made everything feel more vibrant and meaningful, the possibility of building something larger and more complex than her individual achievements. I'm terrified too, she said finally. But I spent 15 years playing it safe and making myself smaller to avoid complications. I don't want to do that anymore. Anthony's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. So you're willing to try? I'm willing to build something real, even if it's messy and complicated and nothing like what I planned. That evening they had dinner at Vanessa's penthouse, cooking together in her kitchen while jazz music played softly in the background. It was domestic and comfortable in a way that felt entirely different from her marriage to Richard. Tell me about your 5-year plan, Anthony said, chopping vegetables while Vanessa prepared the fish they were grilling. Expand internationally, maybe open offices in London and Hong Kong. Build Brooks Strategic into a company that could go public if I wanted it to. Travel more, see places I've always wanted to visit but never made time for. And personally? Vanessa paused, considering her answer. For so many years, her personal plans had been determined by other people's needs and expectations. I want to figure out what makes me happy, not what makes me safe or acceptable or convenient for someone else. I want to take risks and make mistakes and build something messy and real. Sounds like a good plan. After dinner, they sat on her terrace overlooking the city, drinking wine and talking about everything and nothing. Vanessa felt a contentment she had never experienced before. Not just professional satisfaction, but personal fulfillment that came from being completely herself with someone who appreciated all of her complexities. There's something I need to tell you, she said eventually. About how all this started, about Richard and Victoria and the way I discovered their affair. Anthony listened without judgment as she told him the complete story. The humiliation at the charity gala, the months of secret planning, the careful construction of her success while Richard destroyed himself through his own poor choices. Some people might think I was manipulative or vindictive, she concluded. I need you to understand who I am and what I'm capable of when I'm protecting myself. Anthony was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she had shared. Finally, he looked at her with an expression of complete admiration. You took a situation that could have destroyed you and used it to discover your own power, he said. You didn't just survive betrayal, you transformed it into success. That's not vindictive, Vanessa. That's extraordinary. 6 months later, Anthony's children moved to the city and into a house they chose together. Large enough for a blended family but close to Vanessa's office so she could maintain her professional momentum. The transition was challenging at times, with teenage emotions and scheduling complications and the constant negotiation that came with building new relationships. But it was also joyful in ways Vanessa hadn't expected. Helping with homework, attending school events, teaching Anthony's daughter about business strategy and watching his son develop his own entrepreneurial interests. She was building something larger than her individual success. A family based on choice and mutual respect rather than obligation and tradition. Brooke's strategic consulting continued to grow, with Vanessa's personal story becoming part of her professional brand. She spoke at conferences about resilience and reinvention, wrote articles about building authentic success, and mentored other women who were navigating career transitions or starting over after major life changes. The little girl who had once dreamed of having her own business, the young woman who had settled for less than she deserved, the wife who had been publicly humiliated and privately betrayed, all of those versions of herself had contributed to who she was now. Successful, independent, loved, and completely in control of her own story. Standing in her office one afternoon, looking out at the city where she had rebuilt her entire life, Vanessa felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with becoming the person she was always meant to be. Her phone buzzed with a text from Anthony. Kids want to know if you'll help them with their business plan for the school entrepreneurship contest. Apparently you're more qualified than their old dad. Vanessa smiled, typing back, tell them I'll be home by 6. We can work on it over dinner. Oh. The word had taken on new meaning, encompassing not just a place but a life she had built on her own terms, filled with people who valued her for exactly who she was. The woman who had once been humiliated at a charity gala was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more complete. And this was just the beginning of everything she could accomplish when she stopped limiting herself and started embracing her own extraordinary potential.